So how serious is Trump's problem with Tim Cook, and which tech firms are in his good graces? Joining us by phone is Chamber of Progress CEO Adam Kovacevich. He is a pro-tech Democrat who previously led Google's U.S. policy strategy. Steve Kovach is here on set with us as well. Adam, welcome to you. And let's begin with what we thought was a very smooth relationship the first term, and now not so much.
Well, I think Apple has handled their relationship with Trump pretty well. I think this is a challenging issue. If you just zoom out for a minute, one thing that policymakers from both parties have been pointing out for years is the perils of becoming, overly dependent on Chinese supply chains. When we have shortages or pandemics, that's a problem. But it's also just strategically smart to diversify. As a result, I think one of the things you've seen is companies like Apple in recent years embark on something called friendshoring. Let's diversify production to countries where we have a friendly relationship, India, Vietnam, places like that. Now, even in those countries, there's a learning curve for training those workers to produce things like iPhones and iPads. And the reality is that, there aren't enough American engineers or workers with the relevant skills to do that production in the United States. So Apple's strategy makes a lot of sense here. And I think that's where the competing goals of Trump's tariffs really clash. If we're trying to reduce our dependence on China, then it would make sense to have an alliance of non-China allies we could have. But if we're trying to reinvigorate U.S. manufacturing, we just need to be more pragmatic about which of the types of manufacturing we can more realistically bring back to the United States. And I don't think it's iPhone production.
Right. Steve, we were talking about this, a moment ago. But, is that the president's goal or not? I mean, or is it simply the idea that he thinks they're being a little too convenient by just shifting from China to India? We thought that maybe that was part of the goal here. It sounds like it's not.
The goal is to build stuff here. I mean, he's said again and again and again that he wants to see iPhones built here. We've had a number of people from the Trump administration, whether it be Peter Navarro or Howard Lutnick, come on our air and say that's the vision for these tariffs, is to encourage companies like Apple to bring their manufacturing over here. They also, by the way, this tidy relationship between Tim Cook and Trump did win Apple those exemptions from the worst of the Liberation Day tariffs, still subject to the fentanyl tariffs, which is why they're still moving forward with these plans to build in India. And by the way, in those comments today that Trump made, he also said that we're going to have no tariffs with India, which makes it even more appealing for Apple to build there because it's going to be even cheaper to
they got to be able to build there and get them out.
They got to be exactly.
And I love India. I love the story, but they're not China. They don't have the infrastructure yet.
Well, who's they, meaning India?
India.
Yeah.
They don't have it.
It takes time. And I think one of the things he also said was it's okay for Apple to build them in India if they're going to sell them in India.
Which is why they started in the first place.
Right, which is what they were doing. So, and I do think it's what our president does, right? It's a signal to Apple to say, you're being watched, and let's see where this goes. And it's all part of that grand negotiation. So we'll see where it goes, and I'm sure there'll be something that will be built here. Maybe it's not, but I think that was the way that the message was.
Yeah, no, I just think as we were talking about yesterday, India was one of the big winners, it seems, in all of this, and I think might still be. But that's not going to be the whole story. It's certainly not going to be the end of the story. Does that put any other company, think like of an ON or companies with big India supply chain exposure, that kind of thing?
And it's interesting. Yes, India is really great with manufacturing, but it's also services also. So it's going to be a combination of both those where I think companies are going to benefit using smarter, cheaper labor in India.
Adam, very quickly, do we have when do we have the ability to do this, you think, in India full scale?
Well, I don't know, but you're absolutely right. We don't have that ability today. And I think, the reality is that, China has made it really easy for Apple to produce iPhones there. And you said it, Apple would love a U.S. trade deal with India. Anything that makes it easier and smoother to produce phones in other countries, in which I think a trade deal could do that. That's absolutely true. I think it speaks to the fact that, the tariffs have multiple goals which are contradictory to each other. If it's trying to reinvigorate U.S. manufacturing, then you would provide no exemptions to tariffs at all, right? But that's clearly not the case. So, I think that, friendshoring is a good strategy for achieving the goal of isolating China, but it's not clear that there's any consistency around that goal.
All right, Adam, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. Adam Kovacevich with the Chamber of Progress. Steve, thank you as well. Our Steve Kovach.